Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome Jen Taub back to the show, a law professor at Western New England University School of Law, author of the book Big Dirty Money, also hosts the podcast Booked Up with Jen Taub, and a newsletter, Money and Gossip, on Substack.com with Jen Taub. Hey, Jen, how are you?
I'm good. It sounds like I'm super busy the way you said all that.
You got a lot of stuff. We're lucky to get you in between meetings to see what's going on. But
I model myself after you, Dean.
oh, well, don't do that. It's just, it's too much. So Jen, you wrote for Substack how you felt like you got hit by a truck with the E. Jean Carroll trial because you were there in the courtroom. Before we talk about the actual trial, what was it like in the courtroom seeing this day after day?
Yes, I was there the first week, from the beginning with the jury selection through opening arguments and most of E. Jean's testimony, but not cross-exam.
Okay.
And yeah, it's hard to describe. Part of it is sort of being inside of a courthouse without your cell phone or any technology. Only the in-house reporters who were in the press room, a couple people could do that. So, you don't have your crutch, which is your phone. And I didn't leave the building during lunch the first few days because I didn't want to lose my place in line. Because there was a line, to get in, to be like just in the main floor, you had to line up. And then there was a line in front of the courtroom, and they had to put you through metal detectors. So part of it, I think, was feeling trapped inside of a building all day. The other thing is I was, I couldn't type, so I was taking handwritten notes. So already it's kind of a pressured sort of,
Sure.
look, it's kind of like being in a hospital all day, like being in a courtroom. You're just sort of out of the world. And then on top of it, the subject matter was it's tough subject matter. It's really
Sure.
hard when you see a friend of yours, facing, finally getting their day in court, which is really emotional. But also to have to witness the kind of tactics that are used by a defense lawyer to defend someone accused of sexual assault in particular, the defamation, not so emotional. And, having to watch a friend relive a really hard experience that she had deliberately put out of her mind for decades. And by the way, I only became close with E. Jean in 2021. So I didn't know her when she filed her first lawsuit, which is still making its way through the court. But I did know her when she filed this recent one back in November. So I've known her that whole time. And it's, it's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch.
So I remember reading that she said when she was on the stand, there was emotion there, but that this is what she'd been working for, the day in court. And that's what it was. That's correct. Do I remember correctly from that?
I think the thing that made me, I'm looking at the book where I wrote it down. It was something like, I think the lawyer, Joe Tacopina, or maybe it was her lawyer, had asked, why she was there. What are you doing here? And it's,
right.
I'm here to clear my name. And I think maybe I did hear Heart of the Cross, where she said, I'm, how she was asked how she was feeling. And she said, well, I'm happy because I got my day in court.
Right.
And that made me cry. There was something about hearing that just, it felt like she was speaking for all victims of sexual assault. It's hard to even describe because, her voice broke as she said that. And
I can only imagine,
Yeah. Oh, here it is. I found it in my journal. So it was while I was still there. And I don't know if it was, this is why I was confused. This is why I took notes. Oh yeah. So it was on cross-exam. I was there during the cross is when he was saying, actually, no, I'm sorry. It was direct. Because they were setting things up, for the cross. And she said, she said, my day in court finally, I have my day in court finally. It's everything to me.
Right. So this meant a lot. This was for years and years from when the incident happened, when she was actually assaulted. But then for the court system to play out took time as well. So what can you share with people about the significance of the verdict? Or can you just break it down? Because it's about $5 million. It was two parts to it. One was the battery, the sexual assault, and one was defamation.
Yeah. So the reason why the case we're talking about, she only brought this past November, is that was when there was the very first opportunity to bring what's called a battery case. A battery is just kind of any unauthorized, any non-consensual touching of someone that causes harm. And so the particular battery you're talking about was either on the, the jury could say it was rape, it was sexual abuse, or it was just some other unlawful touching. And she could only bring that this November because New York State had passed a law that opened a 1-year window of time that opened in November for adult survivors of sexual assault, because the statute of limitations on criminal cases had, at the time she was assaulted, would have already passed.
Mhm.
And this gave this window for adult survivors to be able to bring civil cases, not criminal cases. So that window opened in November. And right before, and Donald Trump's people knew she was going to bring the case. And right before she brought that case in October, he put out on Truth Social, lies saying it never happened. I never met her. She's just doing this for the money. She's not my type. So those statements were allegedly defamatory. So she took those statements from October 2012. She took the allegation of the assault from spring of 1996, put them together in one lawsuit, which she filed in November. And so that came to court this May. This April. It began April 25th. And the jury verdict, ultimately the jury decided that more likely than not, that he was liable for the battery of sexual abuse, and that also by clear and convincing evidence, which is a higher standard because she was a public figure, for defamation, that he had defamed her. And that was the verdict. The reason why I think the jury, and it was a unanimous jury of 9 people, 6 men, 3 women. And a lot of them were from like Westchester or out of the city itself. I think one of the main reason they probably did not find for the rape charge is because the judge had to define for the jury. And I was looking at this online, that on Twitter, someone put up what his definitions were. And the definition of rape, and I want to try to say this in a way that's the least offensive, but the definition requires the proof of that he would have inserted his genitals inside of her, right?
Oh,
And
so
so
that why,
so
right?
and the reason why, and although she talked about how he had inserted his fingers and it was very painful, and she thought that he had inserted his private parts, that second part, when she testified in the stand, she was asked, well, could you see? And she couldn't. I mean, if you're pinned up against a wall, you can't see what's going
Sure.
on. So there was I think they weren't sure that had happened, or they weren't fully convinced, or at least they didn't have unanimity on that. So that's why they went with the sexual abuse. But he did violate her, they found. And so that's just to be clear that it's not about whether there was penetration or not. It has to do with whether it was his genitals or not.
So I'm glad you explained that for people. I'm sitting with Jen Taub. So what was her reaction? I mean, you're a friend of hers, to the verdict.
So I wasn't there when the reaction happened, but I watched. I watched, and she said that it was the best day of her life, and that's what she said on television, right? That it was. And she's such a caring, warm person. I mean, she pointed to her lawyer, who's an incredible person. She said, here I am, this elderly woman. I think she sees herself not just as getting her day in court, but getting all of our days in court. Anyone who's been abused by Donald Trump in particular, or just generally, they themselves, or have a close friend or family member who has had to suffer in silence or without justice around a sexual assault. I mean, it's bad enough to have been battered by him, to be abused by him, to be raped by him. It is compounds the matter when you're called a liar, and when you are like someone like her reputation was stolen from her. She lost her job at Elle magazine. All these things happened, and he, and that he continues to this day to do that, to me is shameful.
You mentioned that she lost her job at Elle magazine. Can you share anything else so people see the human side to this? Well, what was the pain it cost her personally and also financially?
Yeah, so there's 2 different things. I had mentioned to you that this defamation happened in October of 2022. Previous to that, though, she had a book that came out in 2019. And when the book came out and she named Donald Trump as someone who had sexually assaulted her, he at that time had said those same things earlier, which is she's lying just to make money to sell a book, and all this stuff, and she's not my type. And the damage that in both cases, there was damage to her reputation, a little bit different based on the time frame. Initially, when this happened, it caused her to lose her job at Elle magazine. She'd been writing for them for over 20 years, I believe, as a columnist for a column called Ask E. Jean,
Mhm.
where her ability to comment on relationships and to be a trusted source was so important. And they let her go at the end of December. And that was her source of income. And so and then after that, she started to get the only way to make money to support herself was to start a Substack. And then just as that was up and going, he then redefames her in 2022. And she's trying to clear her name. The people may not know a lot about her. I was not a subscriber to Elle magazine. I didn't read the advice column that she had. But after reading her book in 2019, which I read after we became friends, and understanding this, she has an incredible career. Some of this came up in court, but she was a writer for Saturday Night Live. One of her skits was nominated for an Emmy,
Mhm.
and it starred, I think William Shatner was in it. It actually comes into play, if I can tell you a little bit about that in a moment, because it actually makes her allegations so much more credible. She also co-authored a biography of Hunter S. Thompson. I mean, she's the real deal.
Wow.
She's a delightful, fun person. And as the psychiatrist said who testified about her personality, she's extraordinarily exuberant. Like if you met her, she's like, not only does she light up the room,
Great.
she sets the whole damn room on fire. I mean, she's
Wow.
fabulous. I love her. And she's 79. Anyway, but let me just tell you about the Saturday Night Live thing. And Joe Tacopina did himself no favors, or his client, by letting her during cross-examination explain this. So some folks might know the circumstances around the sexual assault, that she was leaving Bergdorf Goodman, which is right across the street from his building where he lived. She sees him outside the revolving door. He puts his hand up like, stop. He comes in and he says, "Hey, you're the advice lady." And she said, "Hey, you're that real estate mogul." And they're kind of having a flirtatious talk. And he
Right.
said, "I'm here to buy a gift for a girl." And she thought, "Oh, this is great. I'm an advice columnist and this would make a great story in the New York scene." She was sort of part of that socialite scene. And so as they walked around the first floor, he didn't want a handbag or a hat, and they go up the escalators. Now, I didn't realize the escalators have walls from floor to ceiling. Some escalators in some stores, you can see the whole
Yeah,
mall.
sure.
But in Bergdorf Goodman's, they're closed off. You can't see any of the floors when you're on the escalator, if you've been in any of those kind. So she goes up the escalator. They go up to the 6th floor because he said he wanted to buy ladies' undergarments or underwear or lingerie, such with the exact words. They go to the lingerie floor, which was a Thursday night when they're open late, probably, is what she thought it was that night, because it was kind of abandoned. It was abandoned. And they walk over and he sees this kind of a teddy or a bodysuit or whatever, and it's sheer. And he says, "Try this on." And she throws it back at him and says, "You try it on. It's your color." And at that moment, they go. He says. So he goes, "Okay." So they walk to the dressing room, and you might think, what kind of woman? What is she thinking walking into this dressing room? Well, she had just written this skit that had gone on Saturday Night Live, or she'd written it previous years. And it involved the man played by William Shatner, looking at himself in the mirror the way a woman might look at herself in the mirror. Like, and I'm saying this is about stereotypes, right? So the
Right.
stereotype of a woman kind of like looking in the mirror, admiring herself, like checking herself out. Maybe she thinks she looks bad, but kind of all the fawning stuff in front of a mirror. And so she had done some sort of skit to do those gender reversals, because that's what's funny about comedy, or whatever. So she was talking about that skit. So when she was thinking, "Oh my God, this is just like the skit I'd written." Because the Joe Tacopina said, "Why do you need to go see it in a mirror?" She goes, "I'd written this whole thing about the mirror." So she wanted Donald Trump, and he kind of motions to her and gestures toward the dressing room. So she thinks this is hysterical. She's laughing hysterically because this is how comedy works. She gets herself into a laughing jag. They go in, the door's propped open, and because a lot of sales help always leave the doors open because they would lock if they weren't around and the customers couldn't get in. So they go in, he shuts the door, so it automatically locks when he shuts it. And then suddenly he pushes her up against the wall. And at this moment, she's still laughing because she's all of a sudden something that was very funny becomes a nightmare. And she doesn't really know what to do, because she's thinking, "Oh shit, I sent him the wrong signals. He thinks I'm hitting on him. He slams her head against the wall so much that it hurts. She pushes him back. She doesn't scream. She's not a screamer, but she's also she's like trying to figure out, how do we get out of this situation where he's misinterpreted what the
Certainly.
hell's going on? Also, if you scream at somebody in their face, they might hit you. I mean, there's that. Because this comes anyway. So she pushes him back. He pushes her again, hits her head against the wall, and then assaults her. But anyway, this whole story of what went down, when I heard her on the stand talk about the SNL, actually, I think, yeah, when I heard her talking about that, it was kind of incredible, because it completely makes sense why she, as a creative sort, who has a really big imagination, thought this thing could be really funny, and then it turned out not to be funny.
So, and I appreciate you sharing that as well, for people who might not have followed everything as closely as what went on. I didn't know she used to write for Saturday Night Live. I worked at Saturday Night Live for 8 years on the production staff, but I didn't write. I got to write jokes for freelance, but I didn't get to be a staff writer. But that's very cool. So I'm telling you, Jen Taub. So Jen, she gets the judgment now. Trump's going to appeal. That's his right. He can appeal. I don't know if there's grounds for an appeal or not that are going to be victorious, but we'll find out in time. But then there's a town hall on Wednesday on CNN. Before we talk about the town hall in general, I want to talk about one specific part where there's Donald Trump mocking the woman again for laughs. The vileness is Trump, but the violence is also the Trump supporters who laugh at a woman who's sexually assaulted, which doesn't surprise me at all. It just reminds us of how vile MAGA is, I have to be honest. But what is I know, go ahead.
Well, I'm really angry at, how do you pronounce his last name? Is it Chris Licht or Liked?
I think Chris Light is the way you hear it. I don't know him. But I know
okay.
the head
The
of CNN.
CEO, the new head of CNN,
Right.
somewhat new, semi-new, head of CNN.
Mhm.
What we're hearing and reporting is that backstage, as Donald Trump was going on stage, he said, go out there, have fun. Now, what the fuck is that? He should have said, hey, this is going to be really great. I just want to make sure, don't redefame, E. Jean Carroll. Because I just think that, I'm wondering, and they're considering, apparently, according to the New York Times reporting, of adding this or starting, doing new litigation. But, CNN enabled that. One, by encouraging him to have fun. His way of having fun is raping people and lying about it, and insurrections. I don't know what planet Chris is on. And also, beyond that, what kind of guidance did the lawyers give to protect CNN? Because it's not enough just to have this person say, that's not true, this is what happened, because she kept moving on. She didn't set the record straight. And also, they stacked that audience only with his supporters, which created a mocking situation. I mean, it was horrific to me. And it was what I feared. The day of about an hour after the verdict, my editor over at the Washington Monthly had me, interviewed me instead of me writing a piece up. And I said, as much as I'm very happy for E. Jean, I'm very worried about the town hall tomorrow and what's going to happen. And I just felt like I'd been punched in the stomach watching that.
It's indefensible. The whole thing was what CNN did was a mistake, and they know it. I mean, when you've got Anderson Cooper spending last night on this show defending the choice they made and saying, like, we don't want to live in silos. No, it was such a false, intellectually dishonest way of doing. But I imagine he's getting pressure, or feels like he should step up for the boss. For how long Chris Light may or may not be there. I know it's been a year. It's not really working out well for the network, and they're trying to get ratings, and this is the avenue they're doing it. They're not going to grow an audience this way. So if that's what they're trying to do, that's not going to work. So we know that's going to fail. What else about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm always talking about my Republican family members from the Midwest. My father, who voted for Trump the first time around, and maybe the second. My mother didn't vote for him the second. He texted me, "What a pig," about Donald Trump. No. And I said, that's not nice to pigs. It isn't. Pigs, what's wrong with pigs? They're adorable.
No, Winston Churchill said he likes pigs best. Like, dogs look up at you, cats look down on you, but pigs look you in the eye. That's what Churchill said about.
Or did he say pigs is equal, right?
Right. But pigs look you in the eye like there's some. I'm not saying the Churchill quotes. That's all. But look, we all know CNN made that mistake. Will they do it again? We don't know. We got 3 million viewership. The night before, CNN got about 700,000 that same time slot. Was it worth all the negative press and backlash? Only time will tell.
Well, here's what I know. I made a list of the advertisers, the national advertisers that I saw and tweeted those names out. One of them, I mean, I don't want to, sometimes it's best to single one out because,
Sure.
the way, so I'm going to single out Fidelity Investments. I worked there. I was, a vice president of the fixed income funds. I was an associate general counsel. I have my own IRA there. I'm closing my account with them, not the second,
Wow.
but I'm going to move my money to Vanguard. And I'm going to let them know really loudly.
Well,
And I'm going to encourage other people. I'm not rich by any means. They won't even notice, but you never know who does. And I
Well,
don't think anyone, what the fuck were they doing giving money to CNN for that? Same thing with Subaru. What was Subaru thinking? I can't cancel my internet because there's a fucking monopoly. So that I can't change. But
well, I've had on Angelo Corzo, the president of Media Matters, on my show all the time. What he points out a lot of times that these companies, they're not getting pitched the town hall. They're just buying a bunch of spots and the advertisers place them. So sometimes he finds out, because they've done boycotts and stuff, they go to the company and they go like, we didn't know we were there. We didn't ask to be there.
Okay. This is a crock of shit. Can I tell you why?
Why?
Because you can as a company say, I never want to be on if you've had a show about gay rights, or I don't want to be on the Super Bowl. You can do blackouts, but it's cheaper for you to advertise. It's sort of like giving, it's cheaper to say, just find a slot, whatever at this time frame. You could have specifically asked. They knew this town hall was coming up. And anyone could say who advertised on CNN, don't put me on that town hall.
Sure.
They could have done it. And you know what? I don't care. Unless they're going to say something about what they think about Donald Trump. You know what? It's time that I move my money. And maybe in the future,
I'm not suggesting you don't move your money. What I'm saying is that you go to the advertisers now. So they go like, we can say we didn't know it or not, might not be true or not.
Yeah.
But then they publicly will say, we don't want to be on ads again, or they take only CNN, or it's not like Subaru is whatever the big companies are. They have an ad agency that's placing their stuff generally, like someone doing the spots. They tell them we don't, and they communicate it. That's how we effectuate change too. It's about time for the future, and then they're warned, and they do it again. Then it's a whole different thing.
You know what? It's plausible deniability. If you're going to collaborate with the worst president in U.S. history, who's mocking the woman he sexually assaulted, they knew this was coming up. I've worked inside of big businesses, and I know that there was if there wasn't a conversation about in their marketing departments, these are some of the smartest marketing executives in the world. Bullshit. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to say those words on your show?
Of course you can. But look, CNN shouldn't have had it on at all. They should have never given a platform to this guy. And that's on CNN. The advertising is a great way of having an impact as well. It's a way of doing it. So that's good. So it's a multifaceted approach. The last thing we only got like 2 minutes left. I'm chatting with Jen Taub, law professor. So how is George Santos I read reading your newsletter. It's great stuff. The 3 buckets of crimes, but in the last minute and a half here, I mean, Trump 2 years and 5 months, nothing. George Santos 5 months. And it just shows when DOJ has an easy target, they go at it robustly and quickly, and it sends a message. If you play around like George Santos, we're going to charge you swiftly. Meanwhile, it is clearly now by design that DOJ is not charged Donald Trump for anything. And they might one day in our life, if we live that long, let's hope we live that long.
I loved your Substack on this, that this, the way I summarized it when I retweeted you was, this is, a certain slow walking somebody knows how to sprint when he wants to.
Yeah. And
that,
that's the truth of it. To me, what concerns me is the message sent. Like the message sent for Santos is really good, telling politicians, if you do this, we're going to fine you and we're going to swiftly charge you. That could impact conduct. With Trump, it's 2 years and 5 months. He's running.
It's
one federal charge, not one federal charge at all.
It's 4 years since the Mueller report came out.
Well, and we take that, but I've really focused on January.
Yeah, I know, but it's thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. And the reality is the message is right now, Donald Trump is too big to fail.
I think it's fair to say that Merrick Garland never wanted to charge Donald Trump. He might be getting pushed into it by Jack Smith. We'll see. Ultimately, we don't know. I think Jack Smith is doing a robust investigation that might last forever.
It won't matter because Donald Trump will become the next president and then he'll pardon himself. I don't think he will, but I think he'll be the Republican candidate.
Sure.
It's too close. It's too Close.
Yeah.
I have more faith that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee than I do that the Justice Department will charge him.
Of course, there's nobody else. DeSantis is not the person. And they love Trump. They love what he does. They love his
Yeah.
bigotry, his white supremacy,
Yeah.
his belittling women. This is all play. They love this stuff.
Because it's not just Trump. Right now, the entire Republican Party is anti-woman, period. They want to take,
Yep.
Trump proudly said, which is also disgusting, I'm so glad that I ended Roe versus Wade.
I know.
Want to force women to, they want to force women to give birth. They want to force, and they want to force women to continue a pregnancy even early. They don't want to even take medication when it's a mere like bunch of cells to terminate a pregnancy. And they also say that, they want women to put up and shut up, and it's too bad. This is not the future I want for myself, for my daughters, or for anyone in this country.
And I think the one thing that's going to come out of that town hall is the clip of Trump saying, I terminated Roe v. Wade, and he said, I was honored to do it. And that's gonna, and him saying I terminated, we don't have to make any connections. That's going to, so, well, Jen, thank you, my friend, for Friday, spending some time here. It's almost the summer, so I really appreciate it, especially. Have a great weekend.